This week's blog post is the seventh in my series on a visit to Tuscany in January 2024. Quick summary of these posts so far. First three in the series provided some general information for travel, including answers to questions that I wish I had known enough to ask before I went to Italy. The first of those is on planning, packing, and flights. The second is on car rentals and driving in Italy. And the third is on Italian restaurants and the hotel that we stayed at. The fourth in the series is on the Academy and visiting museums in general, also on trains to Florence. The one after that is on Florence's cathedral, also markets in Florence, restrooms, and footwear. And last week's was on the Museo dell'Opera del Duomo, the cathedral's museum, with a few words on the baptistry and the campanile. This week we're looking at the Uffizi Gallery, the Loggia dei Lanza, and I will add a few more words on parking in Florence. So let me tell you about the Uffizi. The Uffizi Gallery is housed in a huge complex whose core building was commissioned by Cosimo I, a Medici, from Giorgio Vasari. Vasari was today most famous for his Lives of the Artists, began work on the building in 1560. The building provided office space, hence Uffizi, for Florentine magistrates, with a gallery on the top floor for the Medici art collection. The galleries gradually took over the building as the Medici increased their collection of Renaissance sculpture and painting. The last Medici heiress bequeathed the Uffizi to the city of Florence, and today it is the most visited museum in Italy. The Uffizi covers 3 large floors in a U shape. Most visitors start with the main painting collection, which is on the second floor. The cafe on the second floor at the far end of the U has an outdoor terrace with a view of the Palazzo Vecchio and the Duomo. Alas, the food is less scrumptious than the view. My husband and I booked a tour via Things to Do that started at 9 a.m. when the Uffizi opened and ran about an hour and a half. There were 5 visitors in our group, which made it difficult to stay together. The Uffizi was really crowded first thing in the morning. As with the Academy and the Duomo tour, which we did a couple days earlier, all the participants had headphones and the guide had a mic, so there was no shouting. After the tour was over, my husband and I had lunch in the cafe and then stayed to see more of the galleries. After lunch, the museum was far less crowded and hence far more pleasant to wander through. So if your schedule allows, you might want to visit in the afternoon. We spent 6 hours in the Uffizi, including lunch. If you focus only on the second floor, you could finish in 2 or 3 hours, but the lower level was a wow for me. More on that in a moment. But first, some highlights of the Uffizi, the second floor. The Uffizi is famous for its massive collection of top-notch paintings from medieval to modern. It's especially strong in Renaissance and Baroque art. I was far less excited by the sculptures, which are mostly from the Medici collection of Roman works. So here, in no particular order, are a few of the works that I loved seeing in person and up close. They are all famous, so you can easily find more information on them if you're interested. On the left is Leonardo's Adoration. It's an incomplete work, but its colors are brighter than I've seen them in photos. I discussed this work in Innovators in Painting, chapter 23. On the right is Filippo Lippi's Madonna and Child, which is absolutely charming. It's one of my husband's favorite paintings. This one is a portrait of the Duke and Duchess of Urbino by Piero della Francesca. There are also images on the back of these 2 portrait panels. This is Uccello's Battle of San Romano, which was much larger than I expected it to be. Uccello was obsessed with linear perspective, so it's a lot of fun to look at the details, things like the lances and the horses, and see how he tried to fit them into mathematical perspective. I really enjoyed seeing Botticelli's faces, such as the angel on the fresco of the Annunciation on the left. I actually prefer the Botticellis that I'm unfamiliar with to the famous ones such as Birth of Venus and Primavera. It's easier to actually see works that I haven't already seen dozens of times. Although, wandering through Florence, I was constantly reminded that seeing in person is a much different experience than seeing a photo in a book. The Uffizi has 3 Maestà paintings, that's a Virgin in Majesty, by Giotto, Duccio, and Cimabue. Comparing the differences between them, they're all in the same room. You can see the effort that led up to the Renaissance. Also, I never got a sense from reproductions of how very large they are. You can see in the photographs. This one is a painting by Hugo van der Goes, the Portinari Triptych. Again, I didn't expect it to be so large. This one had an enormous impact on Florentine art because it was the first example that most Florentine painters had seen of oil paints rather than tempera paints. And the colors that you can use in oil paints are very different from the ones in tempera. See Innovators in Painting, Chapter 16. And then we move to the lower level. The artworks on the Uffizi's lower level would be more than enough to furnish a major museum. My favorite galleries housed a stunning collection of self-portraits by artists. Seeing the choices that each artist made about how to portray himself or herself was fascinating. I had no idea this collection existed, so stumbling across it was truly serendipitous. Also on the lower level is more Renaissance art. Bronzino's portraits of the Medici family are fabulous. I don't know if anyone except historians would remember the Medici name if the Medici hadn't been such great patrons and collectors of art. Moving on from the Uffizi. Before we went inside the Uffizi, we had time to look at the sculptures in the Loggia di Lanza, an open-air arcade, and in front of the Palazzo Vecchio. My favorite among them is Cellini's Perseus, which is this one. Giambologna's Rape of the Sabine Women, which is this one, is interesting more for the composition than for the subject. Giambologna was experimenting with a complex composition, and someone else actually gave it this title. Also in the piazza are reproductions of Michelangelo's David. That's here. And there are reproductions of Donatello's Judith and Holofernes and Donatello's Marzocco, the lion that symbolizes Florence. Just a few more words on traveling to Florence from Selvatelle, where our hotel was. We intended to go to Florence by train the day that we were visiting the Uffizi, but for some reason the train schedule said that we would have had to go from Pontedera west to Pisa and then east to Florence, which would have taken more than 2.5 hours. So we looked up parking garages and we drove into the Sant'Ambrogio Parcheggio in western Florence. It's marked with a large white key on a blue background and has a sign that shows how many spots are currently available. The second post in this series has more on parking. From the Parcheggio Sant'Ambrogio to the Uffizi is a longish walk, but it takes you through a less touristy part of Florence. That was very interesting, and also past Santa Croce, of which I will speak more in a later post. Someone told us a couple days later that Sant'Ambrogio is more dangerous than most other neighborhoods in Florence because there are a lot of foreign students, by which he means US students, and therefore a lot of drugs. We went there during daylight hours only, and we had no problems. Next week, we will look at the Museum of Stone Inlay, which just has some gorgeous stuff. DianeDurantewriter.com has hundreds of posts on sculpture, painting, architecture, and my other obsessions. You can say, "Well done, Diane," or support my work and receive rewards by means of the tip jar on DianeDurantewriter.com. As always, thank you for listening.